Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our video on strings and regular expressions in PowerShell. Once again, my name is Mike, and welcome to my channel, or welcome back to my channel. So if you have not subscribed yet, I'd really appreciate it if you could, so that way you get notifications whenever I drop a new video, and also it helps on my subscriber count, which allows me to have some more options when it comes to customizing what I can do with the channel. All right, so if you could, that would be awesome. So let's get into it here. So let me switch over to my lab environment and talk a bit about here what we're going to be doing with strings. So strings represent basically pieces of text, right? And if you want to call it alphanumeric text, stuff you could type in a notepad, things like that. And they're very popular for properties on a lot of objects in PowerShell. So like, for instance, if I type get service, maybe just grab the bit service here. So we could see, some output that comes back. And if I take and pipe that over to get member, we can look at some of the properties here and notice that some of them are in string format. So string is an object out of the .NET framework. It's system.string. And we can see here like display name, machine name, service name. Okay, those are all in string format, or they're string objects, I guess I should say. All right. So with that, we should be able, or we should have in our skill set here, the ability to manipulate those strings. So to kind of have a look at that, we can put just a string into the pipeline and see what we get. So the easiest way to do that is to just put in quotes here, some text. And if you hit enter on that, believe it or not, I mean, you might be like, well, it just outputs what you typed. Yeah, but it actually took this, put it into PowerShell's pipeline, went through what normally happens with pipeline objects, and then kicks it out to the screen because we didn't tell it what else to do with it. So if you have an object in the pipeline, by default, if it doesn't know what else to do with it, it outputs it to the screen. So if I take this and pipe it to get member, you'll see that just, a couple things in quotes here, you'll see it does produce a string object. Right? Now, not to say that there's a lot to do with the object. It really only has one property, okay, which is length. So the length is just how many characters are in the string. So in this case, if I'm just doing my name, that would be a length of 4. But there's a tremendous amount of methods that are available here. Okay, so we're not going to talk about all of these. They'll be here all day. But there's a lot of methods here that you could utilize with that string object. Okay, so probably again the easiest way to work it is to take the string object and just put it in a variable. So maybe I'll say $name equals Mike. So now what's in $name is in fact that string object. So if I pipe it to get member, again, I could see, what's in here is a string object. And I say a string object like singular. You could also take and send this over to measure object, right? And you could see again, you get a value of 1. Right? So again, there's one string object in here. All right, so now let's say I want to utilize some of these properties and methods. So if I take $name and I look at length, notice I get a value of 4 because that matches the length of the string, how many characters are in there. Right? And there's a whole bunch of other methods available. So for instance, let's use one of the methods here. Let's use to upper. Let's hold on, tab complete, to upper. Right? And what does that do? It took the string and sent it all to uppercase. Right? So that's using this to upper method right here. Okay. There's also a substring method. Substring. And so Let's say I want to start at the beginning of the string, so that would be the 0, and give me 2 characters. Okay, so this method takes those arguments. Where do you want to start, and how many characters do you want? And notice out of the full string, I get just those 2. Right? So you could experiment with all of these different methods that are here. Right? So for instance, like there's a replace method. So if I wanted to use that one, we could do a replace. What do I want to replace? Let's maybe replace the M with, I don't know, maybe an A, something like that. Right? And, oop, no, sorry, that didn't match. Capital M, there we go. All right, so there we go. Right, so not to say you'd want to do that, but, again, you could use the replace there, the replace method. There's also a contains method, which you could potentially use to verify if something's actually in there, right? So let's say I don't know what's in $name, and I'd like to know, hey, is Mike in there? And you can see it's true, and if I put something else, Mike, John, that's not in there. All right. Now, what is interesting about contains, though, is if you use the contains method, it is case sensitive. Okay, so it doesn't tell you that right up front. That's just kind of the experimenting to go along with it. All right. Now, with the methods, though, these are not, let's say, the only ways of manipulating the string object. Right? So I mean, they are there. Don't get me wrong. But there's also a bunch of other operators that you could use. Okay, so like for instance, you may have gotten used to, let's say if I wanted to do something like get service and maybe bring this over to where object, let's say property, let's maybe do status and then equal, and then let's say we want the ones that are running, right? So this would be a comparison operator. So -eq, right? There's many of them. So you could do NE for not equal, GT for greater than, LT for less than, LE for less than or equal to, GE for greater than or equal to. And if you wanted to do a like would allow me to work with properties in string and maybe use like wildcards or something, right? So these are all comparison operators. You use them in commandlets where you're going to do filtering. Right? So they're fairly common, when we're working with that. Now with strings, strings also have comparison operators as well. Like if you notice, I'm using contains here. Well, there's also a contains operator. So I could say contains and then put that in there, and away we go. Right? So I could use the operator. Now, so you might be thinking, well, why would I want to use the operator? The method's there. Why have two different things? Well, the contains operator actually doesn't care about the case. So when you see that the contains operator, it is not case sensitive. However, like most operators, if you put a C in front of it, it does make it case sensitive. Right? So notice that doesn't like that, and now it does. Right? So notice now that outputted to true. Right? So you could use that. So there's, again, a few operators there. Now, let's say I wanted to go the opposite way. So let's say, actually, let me just blank this. Let's put Mike in $name. Okay, so you could use the in operator if you, want to just do the comparison the other way. Okay, so you have contains on one side and you have in the other way. Okay, so it's basically like, is this value in this variable? Whereas, does this variable contain this value? Okay, so it's I guess two different ways of just looking at it, in essence the same thing. Okay? Now, what is interesting though about a lot of these string operators here is in a lot of cases they're looking at the entire string. So like, let's say for instance, if I recast name, let's say name equals my name is Mike. Right? So now that is still considered a single string, right? So if I, look at $name, take that over to measure object, okay, it's still one string in there, of which my name is just a part of that, right? So there's more characters there than just the four that make up my name. So if I were to do something like $name contains Mike, and we'll even, give it the benefit of the doubt here and even maybe give it all that we can, right? Notice I get the false, right? Because contains is doing a full match of a string, not a partial match. Right? And you would get the same thing if you tried in as well. So it's looking for complete matches, not partial matches. Right? So we will, if we wanted to get partial matches, we could bring in an operator called match. And so if I say, hey, is Mike in there? Notice I get a true. All right. Now with match, you could also maybe try the lowercase and see how it's still matching as well. So match gives you these partial matches if you wanted to do that. All right. Okay, so now let's say, oh, and we could also do replace as well. So let's do replace, and we want to replace Mike with, what should we replace Mike with? How about John? Right, and so we can see that I've taken this output. I haven't recast the variable, by the way. I just took the output of it and replaced these characters with these characters. So you can now see my name is John. All right. So now let's say I wanted to do something with this, right? So let's say, for instance, let's maybe do like get service name bits. Actually, let's grab a bunch. Let's maybe do B star. So that gives me a few services that are here. Okay. So now let's say, for instance, actually that's not a lot, and we'll go with it. So let's say, for instance, I see these names, and maybe for whatever reason I want to convert them to uppercase. Right? Maybe. Right. So what I could do is I can bring this over to, let's say, select object, and we'll do some calculated properties. So I want to keep status as is, so we'll list that. Then with name, we'll do something with that. So let's do a calculated property where the actual property is going to be called name, right? So we're just keeping the same, whatever it's labeled as, we're just keeping that. And then a semicolon, and then the expression is going to go in its own script block. So inside of a script block, I can reference the object by the variable $_ or $PS item, either way, then a dot, and then I want to grab the name property, and maybe we'll do the to upper method. All right, so that'll fix the name property. So we're just basically making a new version of name. And then we'll do a comma, and then we want the display name property. All right, so there we go. So that converted just this one over using all uppercase, right? If I wanted to do that. All right, so we have that ability. Now, we could also, let's say if I didn't want, see the thing with select object is by doing these calculated properties, you're working with the strings that are in a property of the original object that was in the pipeline. Okay, so like if I started off with get service here, pipe this to get member, I could see I'm working with a service controller. All right. So after select object, there's the output. If I pipe it to get member, notice, still working with a service controller. Okay, so with select object, specifically with using property, you're keeping the original object in the pipeline. I just used a method on the name property, which happened to be in string format, right? So I'm just using one of the string methods on a property that's on the object in the pipeline. Right? Now, if I wanted to do something with the string that was in the name property and just keep that string and get rid of everything else, get rid of everything else in the service controller, I like to use a different commandlet for that. All right, so what I could do is I could use for each object. So instead of select object, we'll use for each object. And we'll use a process parameter because I want to use a script block. And so inside the script block, I can reference the object that's in the pipeline, grab the name property, and do the toUpper method on it. Okay, so now this time, look at the output. If I pipe this to get member, and notice, what it's putting into the pipeline. It's just string. The original service controller has been blown away, right? So this produced a service controller object, passed it over to this, and what for each object does when you give it a property, it grabs whatever type of object is in the property, which in this case name is a string object, puts that into the pipeline. Okay. And then I told it to take those string objects and convert them to uppercase. All right. So that allows me to kind of work the pipeline that way. Okay. So with select object, you could use calculated properties to keep the original object in the pipeline and just mess with a property that happened to be in string format. Okay, but again, you're keeping the original object that was in the pipeline. And with for each object, you're removing the object that was in the pipeline and replacing it with whatever, in this case, whatever strings, were in the name property. All right, so that allows me to work with that. All right. So that's a couple different ways we could manipulate this if we wanted to. Okay, manipulation, with string objects here. Now, when you are going to get into manipulation of string objects, though, in some cases, it's not enough to just use some of the simple things that we've shown here. So like, for instance, let's say if I had name here and I did replace, right? So that was a pretty easy way to manipulate a string, but it's not always going to be the most thorough way to do something, right? Um, so so where it comes into, like imagine if you're grabbing objects from somewhere, right? So maybe I've got, let's make a variable, pi, or personally identifiable info, PII. I always call it pi for short. And let's say I put in there a social security number. Okay, I apologize if that's anybody's social security number. I hope it's not. Okay, but let's say I have that in there, right? And I want to take that variable and I want to see if it has a social security number in it. Now, if you're going to do like a contains, not a C contains, let's just do a contains. If you're going to do a contains, you have to match the exact number, in order to get a true out of it, right? So let's say it was, I was matching on a different number, right? And notice that comes back with false. So programs that look for this kind of information, they're not looking at it by, hey, let's run every possible social security number known to mankind here and see if we get a match. So it's not like I'm running like a billion different contains operations to see if there's a social security number in there. That's not, that's not what programs do. Like if you have an email program, a document management program, a database program that's looking for social security numbers or bank account numbers or driver's license numbers or whatever, that's not how they do it. So there is an entire language that is reserved for looking at patterns in string data. Okay, so patterns in text data. Okay, and we call this regular expressions or regex, R-E-G-E-X. Right, so regular expressions is the full proper word for it. Right. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that here. I'm not going to cover everything about regular expressions because literally this could be like a 5-day video, like 40 hours. So if you ever wanted to learn a lot more about regular expressions, probably the website that I would recommend, you just kind of Google search for regular expressions, you'll come out eventually to let's see. Bing does not want to show that. Interesting. Regular expressions info. There you go. This one right here. Okay, so this website, regular-expressions.info. And if you go to tutorial, you have probably the most detailed, if you look kind of on the left side here, you have the most detailed free tutorial on regex that I've ever found. If somebody else knows of one that's better, you're welcome to it, right? So, or welcome to mention it, in the chat for other people to have a look at. But yeah, so this is a fairly popular one, a website that you could use. Another one just to have, regex 101 is also a fairly good one to know about because it does have a quick reference down here, but it also allows you to put in test strings and a regular expression query and see if they match or have an idea of how they're matching. Right? So that could be of use as well. Right? So those would be two websites that I'd probably say, you'd probably want to know about. So let me switch back to my slide here. Let's go back to PowerPoint and let me index the slide here. And so with regular expressions, this could kind of be just a Joe Schmo simple cheat sheet if you wanted it, where you're looking at what some of the symbols are. Okay, so like a period for one of any character, so that's like a wild card. And then a plus sign, one or more of the preceding character, an asterisk, 0 or 1 of the preceding character, question mark, 0 or 1 of any character, a backslash and a little w, any word character, backslash capital W, any non-word character, little d for digit, capital D for non-digit. Over on this side, you have the caret. That's Shift 6 on your keyboard. I think that's called a caret. Start of string. A backslash little s for space character. Backslash capital S for non-space. Any named characters. Any characters in a range. So this one here would match any character that would be A, B, C, D, E, or F. Then you've got 1 to 3. So this would allow of the previous character, I can allow 1 or 3 of them, 1 through 3. Right? And then a dollar sign kind of representing the end of the string. Right? So what can we utilize this with? Well, the operator that I showed you at the very end there when I was matching on the name. So if I did $name dash match and I said Mike, I had mentioned that this does partial matching, right? So again, if I look at $name, this is what's currently in there, right? So with match, it matched partial names. Now, you can uh, also use regular expressions with match. So if, for instance, with name here, if I do match, hey, is there a word character in there? Oh, why, yes, there is. Okay. Is there 4 word characters in there? Why, sure there is, right? So it can do partial matches that way. Right? So I could also do something like if I want to match the literal characters, my name is, and then 4 characters, hey, that matches as well. Right? And if I want to make, let's say I don't want to do it like that. Let's say I'm looking for a character, and then I'll say I'm looking for 4 of them, right? So, hey, there's this character, find 4 of this character. All right, so that might be a better way than doing like something like this. All right. So I could do, something along those lines. All right. So that gives me the ability to match up using regular expressions if I wanted to do that. So now let's bring this back to our variable with the social security number in it. And let's set this back to here. And let's do $PII. And there's our social security number. Now, even though it might be numbers, because it was put in here as double quotes, that would still be considered a string object, right? So if I take this and pipe it to get member, you can see again, I'm working with string. So string will have alphanumeric characters in it. So numbers are going to be allowed. So now let's say I want to see if that has a social security number in it. So I could do a match. And what's a social security number look like? Well, it's got a number, a number, a number, then a dash, then another couple numbers, dash, then 4 numbers, right? So does that match? Why, yes, it does. Hey, there's a social security number in there. Okay, now that's probably the easiest way to do it, right? So now let's say though we wanted to clean this up a little bit, right? Let's make the regex look a little bit easier. So maybe on this last one here, we'll say, hey, it will have 4, and here it'll have 2, right? And over here, it'll have 3, right? So something like that. All right, so notice that gives me a match. All right. Now, here's where, though, we need to get maybe a little fancier with the regex, right? So let's say, for instance, here, let me put the social security number out in quotes here. So that way we can, so we're not using a variable. So let's do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. All right. So does that match? Yes, it does, right? So now, me being the enterprising sort that I am, well, maybe I'll try to confuse, the thing that's looking for social security numbers, and I'll put a space there instead. And now notice the regex doesn't match. Okay, so my regex is relying on dashes to be there, right? It's literally looking for that exact character, right? A dash. So what I could do with the regex is that's where I could do a character set. So in brackets, I could say, hey, the next character is going to be either a space or a dash. And then over here, I could do the same thing. All right, so it's either going to be a space or a dash. All right, oops, there you go. So something like that, and notice that that now matches. And if I fix the social security number again, so let me put the dashes back in, I could do something like that, right? All right, so that covers me for if someone decides to make it with spaces instead of dashes. Well, okay, I could still ruin this though. Right? I could still ruin this. So how can I ruin it? Just don't put either, right? And so, oh, that doesn't match now. So remember, let me flip back to my slide here. Remember that there is one of these. See this asterisk character here? See 0 or 1 of the preceding character, right? So there might be a space or a dash, or there might not. So that's the one I want to utilize here, right? So let's go back to the lab, and after the brackets there where I'm looking for the next character would either be a space or a dash, I'm going to put a wildcard there, an asterisk there. So that would mean 0 or 1. So there could be a space or a dash as a character, or nothing at all. And then let's go fix that over here as well. That, right? And now notice that matches, right? So, and let me fix it. Or let me fix it. Let's change the test string. Notice, oops, that's me typoing, my bad. Hold on. There we go. So that matches, and then with spaces, that you notice that matches as well. Guys, so this regex can find a social security number in this format, or this format. Notice all of them returned true. All right. So that could be a way of utilizing, that particular aspect of it. So you're only, you could match whatever you could identify the regex query string as, right? Now, what might be some other possible uses of this stuff? Well, like let's say, for instance, let's say to Active Directories. Let's say, get 80 user filter star. All right, so I want to list out all of my users here. All right, now remember that with get 80 user, it only returns 10 properties. It doesn't return all of the properties. So we see, who's here to work with. All right, so I have a John Smith account. I actually have an account for myself too. All right. Jeff, let's see, what else do I have? The Kerberos account, guest, administrator. I think I've got a couple intern accounts in here as well. All right. Oh, user one, user two, intern one, intern two. Yeah, I'm very original with my names. All right. So I had a project once, or a consulting job where I needed to take a bunch of information out of a customer's Active Directory and put it into a different system. So as like some type of like HR system. So basically we needed to take the users out of Active Directory and export out to a CSV file. And we needed very specific information from it. Right? That wasn't normally there by default. Okay, so what we needed was, I'm not going to go over everything, but like let's say we needed like the name, the department, the OU where the object was in, and let's say maybe a few other things, right? So if you look at though like just a regular user, um, so let's say I do identity and JSmith, right? So if you just take like one user here, and if I look at all of the properties on it, let's force Active Directory to bring back all of the the properties here, if I could spell properties star. So if I look at all of the properties, this user happens to be in the users container. So that's where they're at. So let's say that's what I want to return, right? Users. And if I kind of go look, there's nothing that just comes right out and says the OU is users, or the container is users, right? If you look at all of these properties, there's not one that just has that value in it. I mean, there's ones that have it, but it's got a whole bunch of extra stuff to go along with it. All right. So that's not really what I'm looking for. So the one that I always found to be the closest, if I just want the OU, is canonical name. because that has the name of your domain, then the OU or container, and then like the actual user themselves, right? So I would want this piece and I want to toss out the rest, let's say. Okay, so let's say that's, what I'm looking for. All right. Now, again, how do I identify just that piece? Well, regex could help you with that. Okay. So that might be what I want to pay attention to, right? Something along those lines. Right? So that might be, we'll take canonical name and do a calculated property out of it to return just, let's say, the OU part of the actual value. Okay, so let's say, we want to do that, right? So let's first of all go grab all the users, and then let's bring this over. And I need to tell it to return that property, canonical name, and then bring that over to like select object, and then property about we want name and canonical name. All right. So there's where everybody lives, right? Um, all right. So in this case, I wanted to, keep like this part, and get rid of the beginning and, get rid of the end. Like I want to make a property called OU. All right. So what we would need to do is we would need to identify the different parts of the string. Okay, so like let's say for instance, let's grab this just to work with. So let's put that in quotes. Right? And we want to again get this piece out of it. All right. So what we're going to do is first of all, we could do a replace. Replace will also allow me to use regular expressions. It's kind of cool. So if I want to say replace chassisTac.com with I don't know with the letter A, notice how that works, right? Now, one of the neat things with replace though is you could tell it to replace with nothing. So notice I could just kind of remove it right out from there. Okay, at least that part of the string. All right. But that's not really getting the job done here. So what we want is we want to identify the string in regex, right? So we're going to start at, let's say, the beginning of the string. We'll take any character, multiple of them, right? And then we're going to come to a forward slash, and then we have any character, multiple of them, and then we've got another forward slash, and then any character, multiple of them, all right? And then maybe to the end of the string, right? So notice, actually, I should have probably done a match on that. Okay, so that identifies as true, all right? So now, let's say I want to grab the piece that I want. So with replace, I'm going to take the piece that represents like the thing in the middle between the backslashes, and I'm going to put a set of parentheses around it. Okay, so this is what's called making a capture group in regex. So I could tell it the whole thing represents one like capture, if you will. I captured the whole string. And then this inside the parentheses represents a different capture. So notice that that's inside of these forward slashes here. So I want to grab everything that's between those forward slashes. So now how do I call that? In the replace, I call a capture group by using a single quote rather than a double. And then I want capture group one. And that is how you call a capture group. It also uses a dollar sign, but it's not a variable in PowerShell. it's a capture group in regex. And notice I identified that piece. All right? So that allows me to take this whole string here and then just select the piece that I want out of it. Right? So that could be used to kind of make this OU property that I want. Right? So let's say here, let's bring back up the select. Right? So for select object, um, let's say, let me carriage return this down to the, hold on here. Trying to make this so it's easier for you guys to see it. Let's do the carriage return, and then we'll put the select object on its own line. So property, we wanted to keep name, and then we're going to make a calculated property. So the name of our calculated property is going to be OU, and then semicolon, and then the expression. We're going to grab the object's canonical name, and we'll do a replace with this right here. And there we go. All right, so we have users and we have interns. That's exactly, let's say, what I was looking for, right? So that allows me, oh, and sales. So Jeff Kent was in the sales OU, so that allowed me to pick that one up as well. All right. So that allows me to get, what we were looking for here. Okay. Now I would have to get a little more fancy with the regex because like in sales here, this is grabbing whatever the most immediate OU is. So notice intern one and intern two show as interns, and Jeff Kent, who is in sales, so that's just grabbing. So again, we're taking this, we're grabbing that immediate piece right there. All right. Um, so again, that's the intent of what I wanted. If for whatever reason down here, if I wanted, this text string to match on sales, I would have to get into using operators that were not greedy, as in grabbing as much as they possibly could. So that's when you look at some of these, like these ones, one or zero or one or more of a character. In a lot of cases, regex is greedy about it. It'll grab as much as it can. So notice like here, it blew through the first forward slash and stopped here. It grabbed as much as it could. Okay, so that's what's called a greedy operator. So you could actually take these wildcards here and make them not greedy by putting a question mark after them. All right, so that's what you might want to research a little more into that. All right, so the last thing that I wanted to show here is, let's say, for instance, we wanted to use regex to create, or we wanted to create, let's say, users from a CSV file. So I have ready-made up here just kind of a demo CSV file, users.csv. So if I open it up, I have just a bunch of random names that I got from a random name generator on the internet. So if this is anybody's name, I apologize, but it showed up in a random name generator. So I have this information. Let's say I got this from, like, I don't know, like HR or something, or my registrar system or whatever. And I want to make users in Active Directory out of it. Okay, so first of all, I could take that file and I can bring it into PowerShell by using a get content, right? So that's users.csv. Now, actually not get content. That brings the text in, but I actually want objects. So I'm going to do an import CSV to do this. There we go. So import CSV, and I have a user here, I have a department, and I have a city, right? So it actually made objects out of it. If I pipe it to get member, you can see it's a PS custom object, I've got city, department, and user, all right, are what I have available. Now, let's say in my environment, I have the need to make the users in the format of first initial, last name. Okay, so let's say that's what I wanted to do, right? First initial, last name. Now, obviously, that's not in this format here, right? But can I turn it into that? And the answer is yes, I can. Okay, so ultimately, what I want to do is I want to kind of change this over and I want to match it up with the properties on new AD user. So if I look at like the help on new AD user, um, so I need to supply a name. That's the mandatory parameter. I have let's see, where is it? Where is it? Sam account name, even though that's seen as an optional parameter, it pretty much is mandatory, right? You need to specify a Sam account name. So usually I just set them to the same. And then we might also want, let's see, where is it in the list here? Display name. All right, so I might also want that, right? So name, Sam account name, display name. And we had city, right? So I had the city. That's pretty much in just a city, so I don't need to change that at all. And department. So that's like right there, right? So again, I don't have to change that either. So the data, in here we have city, right? So that matches that. We have department, that matches that. And then user, that one I'm going to need to change, right? I'm going to need to take what the data that's in there and make a name property, a display name property, and a SAM account name property. So that's what I need to do to that data. All right. So can I potentially get away with this? Well, let's see. All right, let's see. So first of all, just to make it easier for everyone, I'm just going to take this and put it into the ISE, just so I could have the text all out here. So let's C colon demo. Okay, so first of all, our first, we're going to do an import CSV, where we're grabbing users.csv, right? So if I run to just that piece, okay, that brings everybody in, away you go. All right. So now we want to bring this over to select object. And we're going to be doing a few things to this. So we're going to do some properties here. And the first property we wanted name. All right. So remember how the names looked right here. Okay, so basically using this concept of capture groups, what I want to do is I want to isolate the last name, the first initial, and then the rest of the first name, right, until the end of the string, right? So that's basically what I'm looking for. Right? Now, so that would mean I get a bunch of text, then a comma space, then a single word character, and then a bunch of text. Okay, is basically what I'm going to be isolating off of here. All right. So with select object, let me bring this down onto its own line here, just so it's easier to read. So select object property. So we're going to make a calculated property. Let's do n equals. We're going to call this name, and then semicolon, and then the expression. We're going to grab the object in the pipeline. The original stuff is in a property called user, so I'm going to use $user, and then we'll do a replace. So in the replace for the regex, we're starting at the beginning of the string. We're grabbing any character, multiple of them, then a comma, space a word character, and then any character multiple of them. All right. So that's my that's identifying the pieces. Now, what do I want to capture out of that? So I'm going to take this part here, and so that would isolate the last name. This would isolate the first initial, and then this would isolate the rest of the first name. So in my replace, I'm going to use, again, single quotes because I have to call dollar signs. I want first initial last name. So that would be capture group 2 and capture group 1. Right, is what I'm going to do there. Guys, let me take this and run it just to make sure that this works. And notice it did work, right? See, J. Vasquez, D. Nicholson, R. Phelps, R. Hutchinson, A. Hicks, right? So that part worked. Cool. So now let's do a comma and let's make another property. I'm going to just bring that down to the next line here, just so it's easier to look at, because I'm basically going to duplicate a lot of what was already there. So in this case, we're making a property called Sam account name. And I also want that one to look the same, right? So let's run this, and cool deal. All right, so notice we've got a property called name and then Sam account name. So now I want a property called display name. So again, I'm going to just duplicate a lot of this. And change this one out for display name. Now with display name, I want something different. I want the first name space, then the last name. So what I'm going to do in my replace here, the first name would be capture group 2, right? So this is capture group 1, this is capture group 2, and this is capture group 3. Okay, so again, they're each in their own sets of parentheses. So I want capture group 2 and capture group 3. That would be the first name, and then a space, and then capture group 1. That would be the last name. All right, so let's see if that works. Run it. And there we go. So name, same account name, and display name. All right. So kind of cool, right? That you could take, this original string and then look at the different ways I can manipulate it, right? So, so let's see. So we also wanted, let's continue here. We wanted city. We want to keep city as is, and we wanted department. All right. So that should finish up what I needed to do to prepare the data. So there we go. Um, so name, same account name, display name, city, department. Now you might be wondering, well, Mike, when you ran that, when it did it, hold on, when it did it up here, when you just had name, same account name, and display name, it did a table, right? And then when you added, it went to this. Well, what happens with PowerShell, because I didn't tell it how else to do the data, if there's an object in the pipeline that has 4 properties or less, PowerShell will display it in table format. And if there's an object in the pipeline with 5 or more properties, PowerShell will display it as a list. Again, by default, there's plenty of ways to manipulate PowerShell to do something else. But that's what's known as just default outputting. All right. So anyway, so that's how you could use regex here to manipulate a CSV file, that has the information in it, right? So this is my original CSV, and then here's the code here that could take the data that was in the user property in that CSV and make a name, make a same account name, make a display name for what we wanted to do. And again, this would be all set now for me to now be able to pipe this right over to new AD user and literally have this, create some users in Active Directory. In fact, let's just see if it might blow up, but let's see. Oh yeah, okay, because I'm not running this. I'm running this in a regular ISE. Hold on. Let me let me run this in an administrative level ISE because I need admin rights obviously to create users. So let's dump that code in there. The formatting could be better. Again, I just tried to list each property kind of on its own line just to make it be a little better. But let's take this and run it. And one last thing. CD, C:\demo. All right, let's try that again. There we go. So if I were to go now, look, I have all these extra users that I don't want. Also helps so I can open the right tool here. All right. And yeah, so there's Hicks, there's Nicholson, um, there's Vasquez, Phelps, Hitchison, and again, if I open any one of those, notice the display name, um, and we've got the SAM account name value set correctly there. All right. So anyway, so that is that. So any questions? Feel free to leave something in the chat. Again, if you appreciate the video or the other ones that I've posted up on my channel, please subscribe if you could. If you already are, no problem then, don't worry about it. So I'll leave you with that, and thanks for watching, and we will see you in the next video.